Thank you so much for joining in. I'm Oscar Blue for Real America's Boys News. How's everybody doing? Good evening to everybody. A tragic, really tragic day today. Uh, as the catastrophe and the tragedy happened last night in Ciudad Juarez, the border that is connected to El Paso, Texas, a border that has been really active in terms to the mass migration. There has been several confrontations between the migrant community and the authorities, as you guys saw not too long ago. There was a confrontation, and they tried to rush the border, the migrant population, into El Paso, Texas. And also, there has been multiple people coming in irregularly through non-port of entries. Ultimately, not only that, uh, the confrontation before that, months away, in the canal that connects from Ciudad Juarez to El Paso, multiple activity that has been in Ciudad Juarez, which tells me and tells, by the way, that now this tragedy that happened, the authorities of Mexico are surpassed, or they do not know how to handle the situation in these circumstances. And they are clearly surpassed by a huge amount of influx of migrants that they have been coming in. Last night around 9 o'clock at night, this is what tragically has happened, and these are statistics that they were already been planned out and already have been posted. A tragedy happened. There was a riot inside of the migrant installations of the Institute of National Immigration, close to the border crossing of El Paso del Norte, this same border crossing that it was rushed a couple of weeks or 3 to 4 weeks ago in the same area of Ciudad Juarez with El Paso, Texas. And ultimately, after this, ambulance started coming, the fire department started coming. Why? Because the riot broke out, and it started like this. There was a huge amount of migrants that they were scattered in downtown the area or close to this particular location. They were picked up by the Institute of National Immigration, and they were taken into custody into this migrant station. Shortly after a little while, the migrants started noticing that they were not getting no response whatsoever, and ultimately it led to understand that they were going to be deported back into their native countries. The president of Mexico, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, has spoken this morning in a morning conference, and he said that the migrants were from Central America and South America, and that they started a riot inside of the installations of the Institute of National Immigration due to the fact that the migrants noticed and they came to knowledge that they were going to be deported and returned back into their native countries. After this, they started burning the mattresses that they were inside of every holding facility or holding room. As they were burning the mattresses, they never thought that this would lead to a catastrophe and a tragedy. Apparently, the women were taken out with the children that they were detained from the center of immigration of Mexico. As you can see, these are really graphic images of the bodies as they are outside in the outside of the installations of the Institute of National Immigration. The numbers came out, and the majority of the people that they have passed away and they lost their lives on this tragic situation are the majority are from Guatemala. There is a really deep investigation into this current situation, which is happening right now in Juarez. The authorities of the fiscal general of the republic has gone into the taking the lead to investigate what happened inside of the authorities, and to this leads also to a humanitarian crime. Not only that, the Department of Human Rights also is there to make and assure that everything is being recognized, documented, and investigated according to the human rights of every individual. The family members of the people that they have passed away and they have been recognized in Guatemala, they already been advised of the tragedy and of their basically their family members, or their family members that they have passed away on this tragedy. Let me just explain what the Institute National of Immigration has said of Guatemala. It says the Institute National of Immigration of Guatemala has affirmed that 28 of the 39 people that they have lost their lives in this tragedy are from Guatemala. Also, the fiscal general of the republic, who has assumed the leadership on this investigation, has confirmed that between the victims are 13 people from Honduras, 12 people from Venezuela, 12 people from El Salvador, 1 people from Colombia, and 1 people from Ecuador. They have not released the specifications of which people are critically hurt and which people are deceased. Now, these were the statements from the head chief of exterior relations, a minister of exterior relations of Guatemala. His name is Mario Bucaro, and he said on a press conference that the people that they have passed away from their country have been fully identified, and the reason why it is because they were interviewed before the tragedy happened. And also, he affirms that there are no minors, casualties of minors and children in this situation. It's also adding to the fact, and he quoted, the families that they have certainty. We already gave them the certainty that we are going to do as much as possible to work hand by hand with the Mexican government, first and foremost, to find out what happened, and then later on to find the responsibles of this tragedy, so we can pass judgment and punishment into the reparation of the situation, what happened. The government of Guatemala is going to do as much as they can to return the people into their family members. Again, 39 people had passed away. 39 people died on this tragedy as the migrants riot inside of the installations of the Institute National Immigration of Mexico. They created a riot. It is not the first time that this has happened. Onto this escalated onto this number. It is the first time that this kind of tragedy has happened. But in the past, they have burned these kind of riots and lootings inside of an Institute National Immigration have happened before. In 2019, it happened in Mexicali, in the city of Mexicali, in the state of Baja California, where they burned the installations of the Institute National Immigration, knowing that they were going to be returned back into their country. Later on, also, it was done not too long ago, 3 to 4 months ago. It was done right here in the city of Tijuana, where 16 migrants from the entity of Venezuela were rioting, and they were not comfortable with them being deported and returned back to their country. Ultimately, yesterday, they did exactly the same thing, with sadly 39 of them lost their lives, as 28 of them have been fully identified as being migrants from Guatemala, 13 of them from Honduras, 12 of them from Venezuela, 12 of them from El Salvador. This amounts of people, lastly, between the people 13 from Honduras, 12 from Venezuela, and 12 from El Salvador, and 1 Colombian and 1 person from Ecuador. They do not know which ones are deceased and which ones are critically hurt. Now, FYI, for everybody that does not know where they're being taken care of, a lot of the migrants, they are being taken care of inside of the United States of America, because of the full capacity of the hospitals in Mexico. A lot of them, they are taken care of inside of the United States of America. And by information that we are getting, these migrants that they already crossed and to be attended inside in the United States of America have already received the political asylum, or the asylum, due to the circumstance that it has happened in this catastrophe, this crisis, this human tragedy that occurred today, as 39 of them lost their lives, and ultimately 28 of them are from Guatemala. Now, the investigations are being done, not because 28 of them were from Guatemala means that the instigators were people from Guatemala. They do not know. They're doing their proper investigations. The authority is doing their proper investigations to find out what were the causes, and ultimately what led to this crisis, to to this tragedy, to exacerbate into a point that they could not contain inside the fire. Now, that is another thing that the authorities of Mexico are being hardly criticized. But the Mexican president came out and said that the authorities try to do as much as they could in terms to evacuating, because this fire was really it's it got really fast to the points of the roof, the points of the sides, and it was really difficult to stop it. So this is the sad thing about it. It is that the riot started apparently and potentially, and it is directed to the understanding extra official information. It is coming in and is saying that the riot, it started because the migrants understood that they were picked up by the Institute of National Immigration as they were wandering in the street. They were picked up, they were irregular, they were undocumented, they were taken into the facility. And after they were taken into the facility, they started understanding that they possibly were going to get deported and return back into their countries. That information was confirmed by the president of Mexico in the morning conference, as the Mexican president said the migrants started ultimately rioting and burning the mattresses inside of their rooms due to the fact that they noticed that ultimately they were going to get deported and returned back. Toxic fumes, toxic smoke was another of the consequences for people to lose their lives. Apparently, the paramedics got there, and the forensics already studying the cause of death of a lot of these migrants that sadly they lost their lives yesterday at night. These are the kind of situations which I don't want to extend, and I want to keep this in terms to informative in what happened. But ultimately, when you have a disordered migration, you have an uncontrollable migration. And when you have a migration that is not particularly orderly controlled, you will have these kind of circumstances. And there's a consequence for a disorderly migration, an uncontrolled migration. And desperately, people, they do this kind of measures because they don't want to be returned back into their country, and these kind of circumstances happened. Sadly, we saw not too long ago, I reported on eight migrants from Mexico that they died being trafficked in through the sea, through the parts of Playas de Tijuana, into the San Diego, California, the San Diego, California Bay, on one boat, on one canoe, on one panga, that the name that is called. There were 15 migrants. Out of the 15, eight were died, and they were recognized by the authorities of the United States, the United States Coast Guard. Eight were recognized as eight migrants from Mexico that they were trafficked into the United States. Seven of them were lost. We haven't heard any confirmation of that. And another canoe was found with 15, where other migrants, the 12 migrants, seven of them were women, five of them were children. This happened 2 to 3 weeks ago. Now you have this crisis. Also, now you have this tragedy happening in Juarez, where you have seen the massive, massive activity that is happening in Juarez. Hundreds of thousands of migrants are arriving to Ciudad Juarez. And ultimately, this led to this horrible tragedy. Wow. I do not. Phew, man. Uh, I cannot. How do I explain? Well, I've seen so much. Uh, we have crossed the Darien Gap. We saw people buried in the Darien Gap. The smell of of bodies that they were buried. You can actually smell it as you're walking. Um, the the actual the vulnerability, and also to the extent of where the migrants go through to just cross and to get to another side, and how this is promoted. And then ultimately in Central America, how the extortion, the abuse, how this is a business, and how some infiltrated individuals, they get into these large groups to damage the image of the most vulnerable people. South of the border, You see a lot of this. Children, people walking for miles without shoes, getting to the top of the border when a lot of these migrants get extortion. They put their lives in the hands of coyotes, and it is a humanitarian business. And it is really sad to see to the extent of where the life of a person goes to lose their lives in this kind of circumstance. I I really as a journalist that broadcasts and studies migration and does this kind of reporting and journalism to migration, it is completely overwhelming. And we're about to go and travel in some days again to one of the biggest places where the crisis is at. And this is what we are going to take first. It's just, when is it going to stop? I really, I digress. I don't know. And ultimately, I don't want to mix it with situations that are happening in the United States, because those are decisions that are being taken care of by irresponsible people like Alejandro Mayorkas, speaking that the border is secure and nothing is going on. It is a really, until, I don't know until when, how many people they need to die every day for not to consider this crimes against humanity. And it is, I really do not know. I really do not know until, it's just for us that we cover this and we do this every day and we cover this every day. The journalism in terms to immigration, it's just undeniably overwhelming. And I cannot even imagine a family member receiving the news that your dad or your uncle, your cousin, or whoever, sadly it is, has died, burned inside of a of a building that, they were, sadly it was people trying to not go back to their country. Ultimately, it is an effect of a lot of irregularities that happen at every border. Basically, open border policies do not work, and they provoke this kind of thing. Again, I will read what happened, and I will give a quick recap, for not to not extend it that much. Uh, how's everybody doing? Oscar Blue right here, live for Real America's Boys News. If you want to hit that like button, hit that bell button on YouTube and on Facebook. Uh, Yesterday around 9 o'clock at night, there was breaking news from coming in from Juarez, Ciudad Juarez, next border to El Paso, Texas, where apparently the authorities were reporting a fire inside of the installations of the government. As you see, the Institute National Immigration Government right here, they have a holding, facility right there for processing for migrants. And ultimately, it was a number that they were speculating that they picked up from the streets, and they took them over there to process, due to the fact that these migrants, apparently they were undocumented and they were wandering around the city, and they were picked up by the authorities to be processed inside of the installations. As they were being processed and all of this, the migrants started to get notice that the authorities were not responding to their questions of asking what is going to happen, where are we going to go. And they found out that they were going to be deported and returned back into their countries. How did they find out? That is an investigation that is being done. This is extra official information. I don't know the details right now. It will be a complete irresponsibility to be speculating on that. And not only that, uh, in terms to that, the migrants started. You have mattresses inside of every holding facility. They started burning the mattresses. A lot of people started saying, "Where did they get the matches? Where did they get the lighter? Where did they get this?" We don't know. That's why there is a huge investigation being done right now by the Fiscal General of the Republic, that is the maximum authority in terms to these kind of circumstances in our country of Mexico. After they started burning the facility, apparently the authorities started getting out the women and the children, and led to this tragedy where information just came out, and the institute, the first one to speak out in terms to relating to the tragedies, is the Institute Nacional of Mexico, which they have said that they are saddened by this tragedy. And I will try to translate as quick as possible what the Institute Nacional of Mexico has said, and then I will go to the details of entities again for people to understand what it is, the current situation. It says right here that the Institute Nacional of Mexico, the Secretary of Government, is completely, saddened by the loss of 39 migrants, foreign migrants. This due to a fire that originated around 22 hours, that is around 10 o'clock at night, in the area of the uh, provisional detention center in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua. The authority informs that the started putting the claim as the correct authorities started investigating what happened inside of the situation. Also, to add that the Commission of Human Rights has arrived and they are doing whatever it takes to safeguard the migrants that were rescued, and ultimately migrants that they were taken into the El Paso sector to be rescued. Uh, they go on and they say that they will try to do as much as they can to work with the authorities of other countries which they suffered this tragedy. Also, to add to the factor, it is that the Institute of Guatemala is the first one to pronounce the condolences to the family. Why the Institute of Guatemala? Because out of the 39, 28 of them were from Guatemala. That's so sad. The Institute of Guatemala of Migration has affirmed that 28 of the 39 people that they have passed away are from Guatemala. Also adding that the Fiscal General of the Republic has assumed the investigation and confirmed that between the victims, there is 13 people from Honduras, 12 people from Venezuela, 12 people from El Salvador, one person from Colombia, one person from Ecuador, and they have not specified which are these numbers. They are people that they are critically hurt, and they are people that they are deceased. So after that, the Minister of Exterior Relations, Mario Bucaro of Guatemala, has signalized in a press conference that the people that they have passed away from their country, they have they have fully identified, which means that they were interviewed before the fire started. He also affirms that there is no minors. That is a God, well, an old tragedy. Something was rescued. No minors lost their lives. Ultimately, that is one of the things that he says, and also that the families, they already been advised and told that they are working hand in hand with Mexico to find out what has actually happened, and ultimately to find the responsible ones, and to find judgment and also punishment and the reparation for this situation or what happened in this tragedy in Juarez. Just to FYI, and to elaborate a little bit, I was last year in Guatemala in the international airport of the National Guard. And that is where the planes that they were being returned back with deportees from the United States, it was consistently. And they were arriving consistently. The people that they get deported more right now, it is one of the populations that gets deported more next to Mexico. It is Guatemala. The Guatemala citizens, they do not, majority of them, they do not apply for asylum and refugee. That is one of the things that we saw inside of the National Guard airport in Guatemala. Sadly, this is one of the things that we don't even know who started the riot. We don't even know who started, the fire inside of the installations of the Institute of National Immigration, which leads to just right now extra official information, which we have to be really careful and meticulous of putting information out there, due to the fact that this is really delicate, and it is extremely delicate of what just happened in our country of Mexico. The Mexican president has already spoke about it, and he was the one that said on the morning conference that information came to him, and the person in charge of the Institute of National Immigration in Juarez, he's taking care of the lead of the investigations of everything that happens into this tragedy. He also said that the migrants started the fire. The Mexican president said the migrants started the fire because they found out that they were going to get deported or returned back into their country. So they started burning the mattresses, and they did not realize what tragedy was going to come ultimately after this. So, whew, what a sad day for the migration, for the migrants, uh, and whew, it's uh, I sheesh, when I will not speak. That's just too much. It's so sad. It's the only thing that I can say. It's really sad that we are at this point. I don't understand where humanity is at a point where you actually know that there's hundreds of thousands of people coming in through a jungle, and you still don't do anything about it. That there's a crisis in Venezuela of food, electricity, and there's a tyrant in Venezuela governing their people, and still they don't do anything about it. That there is a tyranny in Nicaragua, nobody does anything about it. That there's poverty in Central America, their governments are not doing anything about it. And still they're promoting the people to get out. And ultimately, the one that it benefits of all of this, uh, it is the organized crime. It is the cartel, the one that benefits of the vulnerability and the mass migration of the people. I really do not understand until what point, what needs to be done for the government of the United States and all the governments to understand that this has become a humanitarian business for the organized crime and the cartel. And ultimately, it has become a danger to society because people are losing their lives consistently. People are dying in the Darien Gap, drowning in the Darien Gap, losing their lives as they are risking their lives and risking everything for the American dream, quote unquote. Being extortion in every country, paying off coyotes and guides, getting into Mexico, paying more coyotes and guides, arriving to the border, paying more coyotes and guides. And the coyote and the guide has become a resource of transportation. And this is so wrong. The world is upside down right now. We need to be more human with each other. I understand that some things are wrong, some things are right, but it's just, it is so obvious that we're not working together to fix this problem. And it's so obvious that because we're not working together to fix this problem, it is more creating that this mass migration, it is becoming more obviously for society itself to understand that this is a humanitarian business. But sadly, it is clear to the world that we are not doing anything about it. And it is nothing to be done. It is continuing to be exactly the same. There has to be order at one time because people are losing their lives. Because people are losing their lives. And that is one of the things that sadly in this particular point, I I feel like that it's nothing being done, and that and that the one that is profiting out of this, it is the organized crime. Uh, that is the only thing. I will not put attention right now. I'm trying to concentrate into the live feed. I'm not going to put attention to some really degenerated, uh, disrespectful, um, horrible denigrating comments that they are in the live feed. I am not going to put attention to that. This is a really tragic day, which it leads to a mass migration, an uncontrollable migration, which is open borders in Central and South America. And this is the consequence of that. This is the consequence of that. And because of a consequence of open borders, now it will be more obvious for the governments to understand that this is not the solution for a controlled migration. Remember that the ones that started this was the United Nations, the saviors of migrants, with the global compact of migration, and it hasn't worked. It has not worked. It has not worked. A solution needs to be done before people, more people lose their lives. And this was a really tragic day. That just happened here. Uh, really tragic. It did not even happen in the United States. It happened in Mexico. So a lot of the people are saying, well, they need to stop coming over here. How do you know that they were going to the United States? How do you don't know that they were possibly staying in Mexico? That's the kind of degenerated and denigrating comments that you just do not get sometimes. But the mind of a peanut, you cannot understand it more. It is only a peanut. Thank you so much for this live feed. God bless you all. God rest these people that possibly they didn't do. It's not possibly. It's just they didn't do the things right, and it's just the reality. It's We're in the middle of everything. They're carrying a child. Look at this. They're carrying a child. Look at this. This is horrible.
Ustedes tienen familia, somos inmigrantes, no somos delincuentes. Somos inmigrantes, no somos delincuentes.
Discúlpeme, oficial. They have encapsulated them. They're pushing. Now they're pushing. Some of them, they're escaping underneath to the ranches. Look at this, man. They're throwing rocks. They're hitting the National Guard officers. Throwing rocks over here.
Gosh, what a scene to see really unfolding here, and having them use that rope so that they're all able to stay together is really interesting to see all this happen, Oscar.
Is number 4 in the world for violence and homicides. Due to this factor, the military was moved to Tijuana. Entry of San Isidro next door to the city of Tijuana, Mexico. But migrants looking for asylum from Ukraine arrived to the roto, señores, las barreras. Ya no los pueden controlar. They have broke the barriers. They cannot control them.